Chapter 1. The shadow of Tatooine's suns rise in twin silence over the barren deserts of Tatooine, spilling ochre light across endless sands that shift like restless thoughts. In the heat, a child sleeps beneath the thin shadow of a dwelling. Not his own, his small chest rising and falling as though the rhythm of the galaxy itself whispers through him. This boy, Anakin, carries a weight unseen, a trembling thread of destiny knotted around his soul. He knows nothing of it yet. The whispers reach him in dreams, half heard, half remembered, like the echo of a song sung before time began, even in the monotony of slavery. In the clatter of machinery and the shouts of overseers, the Force bends. To him, in subtle ways, pad racing engines roar across the plains, and though the boy is small, his hands move as if the speed of the craft answers a silent command. The wind carries strange scents, ozone from ionized engines, sand scorched by. The suns, the faint aroma of spice floating from distant dwellings. He inhales them all, and in each he senses a hidden pattern, the quiet rhythm of a universe waiting to be bent. The moisture farm stretches like an endless tomb around him, and the desert sky is merciless. Yet beneath the harshness, the child dreams of soaring, of breaking free from the bonds of this sand-choked world. He sees himself on other planets, among strangers and masters who will gaze upon his gifts with awe and fear. He feels the tug of a great unseen tide pulling him forward, away from the plane of his birth, toward a destiny no man can claim, no prophecy can fully reveal. Even now, before he speaks, before he moves, the galaxy itself hums in anticipation. A soft vibration beneath his heartbeat. Qui-Gon Jinn will see this child. Others will doubt, will murmur of imbalance, of danger hidden within innocence. The boy's fate is whispered in secret, spoken only by the wind through the dunes, by the hum of the stars, by the slow rhythm of the Force itself. There is a calling that will pierce the heart of the galaxy, but it has not yet arrived, and the child does not yet know the depth of the hunger that shadows him. Hunger for power, hunger for attachment, hunger for life itself. Night descends, pale and unnatural, casting long shadows across the farm's crude structures. Anakin lies awake under the vast sky, feeling the presence of the Force as a weight pressing upon his mind. It is both warmth and cold, promise and warning, light and shadow. In his dreams, he walks among strangers, hears voices that are not. There sees visions of death and fire, yet also glimpses the faces of those he will love, those he will lose. The threads of the future stretch taut, vibrating with tension, and in the stillness of the desert, the boy's soul trembles with premonition. Even the animals of the desert pause in recognition, sensing the child's unique bond with the Force. Creatures that scuttle across the sand, that hide in burrows from predators, watch him in silence. Their instincts are sharpened, sensing something beyond life and death, beyond predator and prey. They feel the quiet awakening of a presence that is more than human, more than any being bound by flesh or blood. And the boy, unaware, reaches out with hands too small to shape destiny, yet already bending it in the night. A pod races across the horizon, leaving a trail of dust and fire under the twin moons. It is a test, a trial without knowing, a reflection of the boy's own life, swift, perilous, destined to collide with forces beyond comprehension. Anakin watches the streak of light, and something stirs deep within him, a mixture of longing, of fear, of hunger that will one day consume stars and spirits alike. Even now, he feels the pulse of the Force like a heartbeat beneath his own. a sacred rhythm that knows him, and which he does not yet understand. The desert wind rises, carrying with it whispers older than history. They speak of balance, of chaos, of a boy who will stand at the edge of all things, who will tilt the galaxy toward ruin and renewal. These whispers curl around Anakin as he sleeps, pressing into the small hollows of his mind, settling like sand into the corners of memory. They murmur prophecies he cannot yet decipher, warnings he cannot yet heed, and in the emptiness of that desert night, a shadow begins to stretch across his soul, dark and infinite, touching him softly, inexorably. By dawn, the suns will rise, again merciless and golden, and the boy will awaken to another day of toil, another day of insignificance in the eyes of men. Yet the Force is watching. It bends and weaves, shaping a boy into legend, sorrow into destiny. Every laugh, every tear, every spark of anger or joy becomes a ripple in the ocean of the galaxy. Even now, the shadow waits patiently, for patience is eternal, and destiny, once set in motion, cannot be halted. And so the child stirs, blinking against the harsh light, feeling for the first time the weight of something greater than himself. The air carries a faint tremor, a vibration that will grow into storm and silence, into fire and ash. In the emptiness of Tatooine, beneath twin suns and starlit skies, Anakin Skywalker begins the slow, sacred journey toward power, ruin, and redemption. The sands whisper, the Force sighs, and somewhere in the distance, destiny waits. Patient as eternity, the shadow is already there. It watches, it whispers, it waits. Chapter 2. The Jedi's chosen. The desert fades behind him, replaced by the austere corridors of the Jedi Temple, where marble glows with the pale light of distant suns filtered through crystalline spires. Here, in the heart of the Order, a boy arrives whose name is whispered with both hope and unease. Anakin Skywalker, no longer merely child of Tatooine, is a vessel of power, untamed and raw, carrying within him the tremors of a galaxy yet to be remade. The walls seem to breathe with anticipation, sensing the ripples of destiny that accompany. Him, Qui-Gon Jinn, walks beside him, silent, measured, attuned to the subtleties of the Force. He alone perceives the duality within the boy, light unspoiled, shadow nascent but palpable, like a storm held in embryonic form. The council observes from afar, their eyes both wary and intrigued. Prophecy is a fragile instrument, and the words carved into ancient texts speak of balance, of ruin, of a chosen one who will bring salvation through fire and sorrow. They debate in hushed tones, for to name the child as such is to bind fate itself with fragile human words. In the chambers of the temple, the boy is tested. His hands tremble with energy beyond his years, and his mind grasps patterns invisible to even the most learned masters. He lifts stones without touching them, senses currents of air, warmth, and light that bend beneath his focus. The masters watch, some with admiration, some with fear. Master Yoda, small yet eternal, perceives a tension in the boy, a force of creation intertwined with potential destruction. This duality is sacred, ancient, and perilous. Anakin's nights are no longer his own. Dreams follow him into meditation halls and quiet gardens. Visions of distant planets, of faces that will matter, of futures unfolding in splintered fragments. He hears the echo of the desert wind in the corridors of marble, a reminder that he carries the weight of Tatooine still, the hunger, the longing, the fear. Attachment calls to him in whispers too soft for others to hear, and the Force, silent and patient, begins to shape him according to its own inscrutable will. The rituals of the Jedi surround him. He learns to breathe in harmony with the currents of the galaxy, to move without intention, to see beyond the veil of the present. Each lesson is a subtle weaving of destiny, each trial a silent test of heart and mind. Yet even as he learns the ways of the light, shadows gather, not as enemies but as companions, lurking at the edges of perception, their voices soft, persuasive. Eternal Qui-Gon, who senses what others cannot, whispers caution. He is more than child, more than pupil. He is a storm awaiting the moment to break. And the boy, though unaware of the weight he bears, feels the stirrings of power within, a pulse that resonates with the pulse of the galaxy itself. It calls to him not only to heal and protect, but also to dominate, to shape, to claim. The council debates. They speak in measured tones of prophecy and risk, of the boy's potential to heal the galaxy or to rend it asunder. They speak of balance, of the light, and of the shadow that ever lingers at the edges of power. Some fear him, others hope. Yet none can fully know the magnitude of what has arrived, for the boy is already both chosen and lost, a nexus of destiny and dread. Anakin wanders the temple alone at night, feeling the marble cold beneath his small hands. The corridors echo with the memories of centuries, the wisdom of those who have walked before, the silence of masters who now sleep among the Force. He senses the weight of countless eyes upon him, and in that weight he finds a whisper of freedom, a hint that his path may be his own, if only he dares to seize it. Yet even in this nascent independence, the shadow clings, silent, inevitable, patient as the stars. In the quiet halls, the Force speaks to him in fragments, visions of death, of fire, of love lost and power gained. It does not warn, it does not instruct, it merely whispers, and the boy listens, half in fear, half in longing. He begins to understand, without fully realizing, that to walk this path is to carry the hopes of the galaxy upon shoulders that are too young, too human, too untested. And yet the Force hums its secret rhythm, urging him forward, molding him in ways that will one day eclipse memory and legend. The temple sleeps beneath a pale moon, yet within its walls the storm of Anakin's destiny gathers strength. In the solitude of meditation chambers, the boy senses glimpses of what he may become. A healer of worlds, a destroyer of orders, a being whose choices will echo through the stars long after flesh and bone have returned to dust. And always the shadow watches, patient, inexorable, promising ruin and illumination in equal measure. Thus, the boy becomes a Jedi, though never fully a disciple. He is the chosen, yet bound to none but the unseen currents of the Force. The winds of destiny swirl around him, whispering secrets in voices older than time. And in these first steps among the masters, in these tentative gestures toward wisdom, he begins the slow, sacred journey toward power, corruption, and the tragic fulfillment of prophecy. The suns rise again, pale and distant beyond the temple walls, and Anakin stands at the threshold of a future unwritten yet inevitable. The Force murmurs in his veins, the shadow stretches, the galaxy waits, and somewhere far beyond the gaze of any master, the first threads of darkness coil, subtle, patient, eternal. Chapter 3. Echoes of attachment. The temple hums with the quiet order of centuries, yet within its perfect walls, a tension stirs, subtle, persistent, like the tremor of a distant storm. Anakin walks among the masters, his mind alive with lessons, rituals, and the unseen currents of the Force. Yet even in this sanctum of discipline, a voice calls to him from elsewhere, soft and persistent, the voice of attachment. It is neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but a thread, delicate yet unbreakable, binding him to faces, to moments, to dreams that linger beyond the boundaries of the present. He thinks of Padmam, whose presence has become a secret pulse in his heart. Though separated by distance and circumstance, her image enters his mind unbidden, luminous and tender. The Force bends around this attachment, twisting the currents subtly, whispering warnings he does not yet comprehend. Desire and fear entwine. Inseparable, he feels the ache of protection, the pang of loss, imagined but not yet realized. And the Force, ever patient, observes the boy as he navigates these fragile emotions, knowing they will be both his salvation and his doom. In quiet moments, he revisits memories of Tatooine, the twin suns burning across endless sands, the clamor of the slave markets, the faint scent of spice in the wind. They cling to him as ghosts, both comforting and tormenting. Attachment grows not only to the living but to what has been lost, and the boy senses, with a fear he cannot yet name, that every bond carries its own shadow. Love and grief, hope and despair, joy and torment, they are inseparable, like twin strands of a single destiny. The Jedi preach detachment, yet their words, though solemn, cannot reach the core of his being. He senses that the Force is not a chain to bind him, but a river to navigate, and in its waters, emotion is both compass and trap. He learns to meditate, to channel his feelings into clarity, yet clarity is always tinged with longing, and longing is the first whisper of darkness. Even as he masters the movements of the Jedi, the movements of the mind remain uncharted, and in this uncharted space, shadows gather patiently. Dreams come more vividly now, each one a fragment of possible futures. He sees himself standing among the stars, wielding the Force with ease and authority. Faces appear, some he loves, some he fears, some he has yet to meet. They speak in silent tongues, conveying warnings he does not fully understand. The Force bends to the resonance of emotion, and in these dreams, the boy glimpses the intoxicating power of attachment, the strength it lends, the vulnerability it exposes, and the silent thread that leads inevitably toward shadow. His nights are restless. The corridors of the temple, empty and still, seem to echo with voices not of the present, yet intimately familiar. He feels the weight of expectation, both from the masters who guide him and from the unseen currents that weave through the galaxy. He wonders, in quiet moments, if attachment is sin or salvation, if love is blessing or curse. And in these contemplations, he begins the slow understanding that choice is never free, but always entwined with consequence, and that the Force itself may demand both sacrifice and surrender. The boy's bond with Pand becomes secret and sacred, a tether across space and time, carrying both comfort and peril. Each whispered thought of her calls him to tenderness and desperation, to hope and fear. The Force reacts subtly, bending around this delicate line between devotion and obsession. Masters may sense only fragments, glimpses of his turmoil in fleeting gestures or in the tension of his posture, yet they cannot perceive the fullness of the storm. Only the Force, eternal and patient, watches without judgment, knowing that attachment is the crucible in which his destiny will be forged. In the garden of the temple, he walks alone beneath moonlight reflected in crystalline fountains. Shadows pull at his feet, whispering of loss, of betrayal, of a future yet unrealized. He reaches out with his mind, sensing currents unseen, drawing comfort from the touch of the Force, yet also encountering its undercurrent of warning. Love, he begins to understand, is not merely emotion. It is a power that can heal or destroy, protect or ensnare. And the boy, still innocent in form yet ancient in spirit, feels the stirrings of both possibility and doom within this fragile tether. The Jedi instruct him in the doctrines of restraint, of duty, of impartiality. Yet the lessons reach only part of his soul. Another part, ungoverned and sacred, responds to the pull of attachment with a quiet defiance. The shadow listens, silent and patient, recognizing that this bond, hidden from the eyes of the world, is a seed that will one day sprout into both great power and profound sorrow. Even as he dreams of victory and love, the shadow coils at the edges of perception, waiting for the moment to entwine itself fully around the boy's heart. In meditation, he sees echoes of those he has lost, glimpses of lives he may never lead, and whispers of futures shaped by desire. These visions are neither prophecy nor illusion. They are fragments of what might be, half-truths that illuminate and deceive in equal measure. And within them, the Force murmurs in a voice older than stars. Attachment is neither sin nor salvation, but a path, winding and treacherous, that will shape him into both hero and destroyer. The sun rises on the temple, casting pale gold across the silent halls. Anakin rises as well, carrying the weight of unseen threads in his heart. Each choice, each whisper of longing, each act of devotion becomes a stone in the foundation of destiny. And the shadow waits, patient and eternal, for the day when these threads will be tested, when attachment will become the crucible in which he is forged into the instrument of prophecy. The Force hums beneath the boy's feet, silent, eternal, and infinite. And somewhere, in the interstice of love and loss, of hope and fear, the echo of shadow begins to coil, subtle yet inexorable, around the boy who will one day bear the name Vader. Chapter 4. The phantom of war. The galaxy trembles, though few perceive its trembling as anything more than distant rumor or the clamor of politics. Stars burn with light and fire, yet the dark eddies of conflict coil silently between them. Anakin moves among these currents, now no longer merely pupil, no longer merely child. He has grown in strength and skill, guided by the masters, yet guided also by whispers of prophecy, of shadow, of destiny unclaimed. The drums of war echo faintly across the Force, a cadence that resonates deep within his soul. The separatists rise like a phantom tide, spreading across systems like smoke over water. The Jedi, bound to duty and principle, move to intercept, their discipline a fragile barrier against chaos. And within this vast conflict, the the Knight finds himself called to acts that test both morality and mastery. He pilots ships and commands armies, yet each victory brings no joy, only the hum of inevitability. Stars burn worlds, fracture, and the Force watches, ever patient. As the boy shapes the tides of fate in the heat of battle, he senses the hidden currents of life and death. Every choice, every strike, every command reverberates through the web of the Force. The clone troopers obey without question, the machines of war responding as extensions of his will. And yet, in each act of triumph, a shadow deepens within him, subtle as the shift of a planet's orbit. The victories feed skill, the victories feed power, but they also feed a hunger unspoken, a yearning for control that the Jedi cannot name, that he cannot yet understand. Even among the victories, doubt whispers. He watches comrades fall, children, of war and destiny alike, and wonders if the Force itself permits such destruction as part of some greater harmony. He senses the tug of anger in his heart, a satisfaction in dominance that he knows must be hidden. For the Jedi preach balance, but the boy's senses imbalance, a raw and intoxicating power, waiting, patient, eternal, for those who dare to grasp it. The shadow lingers at the edges of his vision, unbidden yet inevitable. In his dreams, he sees the faces of those he will love, of those he will lose, mirrored against the fires of battle. The screams of the dying echo as both warning and song. The galaxy moves around him like water around a stone, yet he is the stone and the water both. The Force bends to him, answers him, and yet it hums a caution. Power is a river that can drown as easily as it can sustain. He feels it now in his bones, in the tremor of engines beneath him, in the weight of stars suspended in silent chaos. Qui-Gon's absence is a whisper that lingers. The master who first saw the boy's potential, who first whispered caution, is gone, leaving only the echo of guidance. Other masters offer wisdom, yet even their voices cannot pierce the growing shadow. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, a thrill at victory, a pulse of fear that turns to anger, a desire to control outcomes beyond moral reckoning. The shadow does not announce itself, it waits, patient, eternal, in the pauses between triumph and grief. In the quiet reflection before the next battle begins, Anakin begins to understand the power of fear and anger, not as enemies, but as instruments. They sharpen his mind, fuel his skill, and illuminate the weaknesses of both friend and foe. He senses the rhythm of life and death in ways no other Jedi can, feels the threads of destiny vibrating in response to his touch. And yet, he also senses the cost. Each choice bends the soul slightly. Each act of war etches deeper lines into the being he is still becoming. Victory is sweet, but hollow. Triumph is absolute, yet incomplete. The shadow waits, subtle as the drift of sand across Tatooine's plains, patient as eternity itself. In council chambers and command posts, strategies are debated, orders dispatched, plans drawn like sacred sigils. Yet Anakin sees beyond these mortal calculations, perceiving patterns of cause and consequence invisible to others. The galaxy is a web of potential, and he is a hand tracing lines through it, sometimes deliberately, sometimes without intent. The Force murmurs in response, a voice of awe, dread, and anticipation. He is a fulcrum of fate, pivoting between light and dark, destruction and salvation, love and loss. And in the quiet hours, when stars hang like silent witnesses across the void, he feels the shadow more keenly. It is patient, unhurried, coiling, around hope and fear alike, promising power yet threatening ruin. He dreams of fire and blood, of faces he will never forget, of voices calling him forward into acts that will define the galaxy. He dreams also of Padam, whose presence is a tether to love, a tether to humanity, and a tether that cannot be severed without cost. The phantom of war is not merely outside him, it is within. Battles rage across the galaxy, yet battles rage also in the corridors of his mind, in the chambers of his heart. Each victory, each act of command, each pulse of the Force he channels, draws him closer to a truth he cannot yet name. That power and attachment are inseparable, that destiny is both burden and gift, and that the shadow he senses is patient, enough to endure centuries if need be. The suns rise and fall across countless systems, and the boy, now a knight, moves inexorably along the path that will forge him into the instrument of prophecy. The phantom of war stretches across the stars, carrying whispers of ruin and revelation alike. He hears them in the hum of ships, the cries of the fallen, the silence between breaths. The force bends, eternal, patient, as it always has, guiding, shaping, observing, whispering of choices yet to come. And somewhere, in the edges of perception, the shadow coils, silent and eternal. It waits for the moment when fear will turn to anger, anger to wrath, and the boy will no longer be merely night, but something far greater and far darker. The galaxy trembles, unseen, as the phantom of war moves both without and within. Chapter 5 Visions of the Dark Night falls across the galaxy like a shroud, and in its silence the force bends, stretches, and whispers. Anakin sleeps fitfully, though sleep is never free of visions. Dreams press against him with the weight of inevitability, scenes of fire, death, and stars collapsing into shadow. They are not dreams of the ordinary mind. They are currents of possibility, fragments of futures that may yet be, yet have been always in some hidden corner of the Force. In them, he sees himself wielding power that no Jedi could fathom, shaping the fate of entire worlds with thought alone. The dark side calls softly at first, a voice without body, a presence without form. It does not tempt with cruelty, nor with rage. It tempts with understanding, with mastery, with knowledge that exceeds the confines of doctrine. In these visions, he perceives what the Jedi do not teach, the ability to prevent loss, to save those he loves, to bend time and death itself to his will. The promise is intoxicating, sacred, and terrible. It hums beneath his skin like a vibration of the cosmos itself, patient and eternal. He dreams of Podmum, her face luminous, her voice echoing across the void, yet tainted by sorrow. He sees her in danger, in pain, as if the universe conspires to strip her from him. Anguish rises, coiling round his chest like a serpent, and with it, the dark side offers its solution: power, absolute and unflinching, to command life and death, to alter the inevitability of fate. It whispers that attachment is not sin, but instrument, that love need not be passive, that control is sacred. The visions deepen. He walks through corridors of fire and shadow, corridors lined with the faces of those he will lose. Qui-Gon, his friends, innocents across the galaxy. They speak in silence, their eyes reflecting pain and warning. Yet in the shadows, a figure waits, a teacher of forbidden knowledge, patient and knowing. This teacher does not speak, yet the boy feels every word, the power to save, to prevent suffering, to master the inexorable currents of fate. And in that whisper, the shadow tightens its coil, subtle and inexorable. He wakes, sweating, heart thrumming like twin drums of a distant war. The temple is quiet, sterile, ordered, but the visions linger. He cannot rid himself of them, for they are more than prophecy. They are the pulse of the Force, bending around him, shaping him, revealing truths the Jedi fear to acknowledge. He senses a power beyond instruction, a freedom beyond law, a command beyond the will of others. The dark side waits, patient, knowing that curiosity, fear, and desire are its allies. During the day, he moves among peers and masters, yet he feels the solitude of the gifted, the isolation of the chosen. He senses shadows beneath every teaching, whispers between every lesson. the faint hum of inevitability that colors every action. The galaxy itself seems to respond to his unrest. Stars flicker, winds shift, currents of energy tremble, and always, in the edges of perception, the dark side hums, soft as the pulse of a dying star, eternal as the space between worlds. The visions are not always of violence. Sometimes they are of peace achieved, of harmony restored, of lives preserved. Yet, each glimpse is tainted by cost, a shadow creeping along the edge of light. He sees victories won only through the suffering of others. He sees safety bought only with fear. And he senses, in the pit of his being, that the force itself is neither wholly just nor wholly merciful. It is vast, eternal, and indifferent. And he is learning to navigate it in ways few can comprehend. By evening, he begins to understand a terrible principle, that power is not given it, is claimed. That control over the currents of fate requires courage, cunning, and, if necessary, ruthlessness. And though the Jedi preach patience, detachment, and humility, the visions whisper otherwise. Mastery requires commitment beyond morality, knowledge, beyond instruction, and a willingness to endure the isolation that comes with absolute comprehension. He begins to test the currents, subtly, imperceptibly. Small experiments in the Force, bending objects with thought alone, extending influence over outcomes beyond simple cause and effect. The results are intoxicating. Each success hums through him like fire across veins, and with each step, the dark side, patient and eternal, coils tighter, whispering in promises of what might be, safety for those he loves, power over fate, dominion over pain. The night deepens. The twin moons of distant systems rise in quiet resonance with the Force, and the visions grow more vivid, more intimate, more persuasive. He sees not just what might happen, but what will happen if he follows the path laid before him by shadow and necessity. He feels the weight of destiny pressing down, a presence both exhilarating and terrifying, and somewhere in the distance, beyond sight and sound, the shadow waits, patient and eternal, knowing that one choice, one surrender, one embrace of power will alter the course of stars and souls alike. The dawn arrives, pale and distant, yet even in its light, the echoes of the night linger. Anakin rises, not fully knowing what has occurred, yet aware that something fundamental has shifted. He feels the pulse of possibility, the tremor of choice, and the ever-present coil of shadow that watches, eternal, as he takes another step, along a path that will lead him toward greatness, ruin, and the fulfillment of prophecy. The Force whispers, the dark side waits, and in the depths of vision and shadow, the boy begins to understand, without yet naming, that he has glimpsed power beyond the Jedi's grasp, and that the cost of mastery may be the very essence of his soul. Chapter 6. Betrayal of the Council. The halls of the Jedi Temple, once places of silent contemplation and measured guidance, now carry the weight of judgment. The Council watches, deliberate, cautious, their faces etched with concern for the boy who is no longer a child, but not yet fully a knight. Anakin stands among them, tense and restless, sensing the currents of power within himself and the subtle disapproval in their gaze. Each word spoken is a tether, each command a chain, and in the spaces between, the shadow murmurs, patient, eternal. They question his choices in war, his attachments, his judgments. They speak of patience and restraint, of detachment from emotion, of the necessity to serve the galaxy above all else. Their words are precise, but to Anakin they are walls closing in, a cage built from doctrine. He feels the echo of injustice, of limitation, as if the force itself has been constrained, and he alone perceives the breadth of its currents. The masters, in their wisdom and caution, do not see the stirrings of destiny in the boy's eyes. Only what they fear: imbalance, recklessness, the shadows they have long sought to deny. In quiet meditation, he senses their fear as if it were a tangible presence. It coils around him, not hostile but suffocating, whispering that the very order sworn to guide him doubts his capacity for greatness. He feels the weight of prophecy pressing upon him, the unseen gaze of the force bending toward outcomes he cannot yet fully comprehend. And in this tension, a quiet resentment takes root, subtle, almost imperceptible, growing like a seed beneath stone. The shadow listens, patient and eternal, as it begins to entwine itself with the boy's perception of justice and truth. The council assigns missions, tests, and responsibilities, each framed in the language of guidance, yet imbued with limitation. Anakin executes them with skill unmatched, yet the praise is tempered, the approval measured. The masters see only the external, the results, not the unseen currents he navigates, not the weight of lives saved or lost at the edge of his control. Their lack of acknowledgement stirs something deep within him, quiet sense of betrayal, a whisper of isolation, a longing for recognition beyond their measured praise. He walks alone through temple gardens at night, the crystalline fountains, reflecting starlight, the force humming softly beneath his feet. In solitude, he contemplates the intentions of those who judge him, the doctrines that bind them, and the shadow that now speaks with subtle clarity. It tells him that attachment is not weakness, that ambition is not sin, that destiny may require the breaking of chains imposed by others. Its voice is patient, eternal, neither cruel nor gentle, simply certain. And Anakin listens. Moments arrive that test his allegiance, orders that conflict with instinct, decisions that demand obedience over insight. And in each, he feels the tension between duty and understanding, between the dictates of the council and the pull of prophecy. He senses that the Jedi speak of balance, yet enforce a rigidity that may hinder the very harmony they claim to protect. He begins to perceive cracks in the order, flaws hidden behind ritual and tradition, and the shadow smiles silently, waiting in the quiet of his chambers. He remembers Qui-Gon's teachings, whispers of freedom, caution, and perspective. Yet, even the echoes of his first master cannot quell the rising tide of discontent, of perceived betrayal. The boy, no longer child, still not fully man, feels the stirrings of doubt, subtle yet persistent, weaving around loyalty and morality. The shadow coils, patient and eternal, whispering of alternatives unspoken, paths forbidden, power unconstrained. The galaxy beyond the temple stirs with war and chaos, yet the greatest battle now lies within. Anakin senses it, the currents of the Force tug at his heart, whispering that guidance may sometimes blind, that rules may sometimes betray, that destiny may demand disobedience for the greater whole. And in the subtle hum of the Force beneath his hands, he perceives that power must sometimes be seized, not requested, commanded, not obeyed, in council chambers. Voices rise and fall like ritualistic chants, debates that seem eternal, yet futile. Anakin hears the words as chains, not counsel, and the shadow tightens its coil. He begins to see that the future may demand choices the Jedi cannot sanction, actions the council cannot understand. The weight of the prophecy presses, the currents of the Force stir, and the boy realizes that his path may diverge from the order before him. The first fracture forms, silent, inevitable, a rift between loyalty and destiny, and in the quiet moments, when the temple sleeps and the stars themselves seem to listen, Anakin feels the shadow fully awaken. It speaks not in commands, but in certainty, patient and eternal. It whispers that the galaxy is his to shape, that destiny is his to claim, that the order, though ancient and wise, cannot contain the breadth of what he will become. The boy understands, without yet naming, that betrayal need not come from malice, it may come from caution, from fear, from the limitations of those who cannot see what the Force has already revealed. The dawn arrives, pale and distant, washing the temple in light that is both revealing and cruel. Anakin rises with the knowledge that the currents of destiny are shifting beneath him. The council watches, patient yet oblivious, unaware of the internal fracture forming in the heart of their chosen. The shadow coils ever tighter, patient and eternal, as the boy takes the first steps toward a path that will bring him both mastery and ruin. The Force hums beneath his feet. The galaxy trembles beyond the walls, and somewhere, unseen, the shadow waits, eternal, knowing that one choice, one surrender, one embrace of power, will transform the boy into the instrument of prophecy, and the galaxy into its crucible. Chapter 7. The Whisper of Sidious Galaxies. Heartbeat shifts, slow and imperceptible, yet ever present. A rhythm felt by those attuned to the currents of the Force. In this subtle vibration, Anakin senses a presence, not yet fully realized, but patient and eternal. It is neither friend nor enemy, yet it calls to him with a voice as soft as wind through crystal spires. The shadow listens, coiling tightly, as the boy's mind bends toward the whisper. And the whisper bends the mind. Sheev Palpatine, hidden behind the guise of statesman and guide, observes the boy with careful calculation. His smile is calm, benign, yet beneath it lies the precision of centuries, the patience of one who has watched worlds burn and rise in cycles of order and chaos. The old serpent does not strike, he does not demand, he merely whispers, subtle as the currents beneath a sea, and the boy, attuned to power and craving understanding beyond the council's reach, listens. The whispers are promises, fragments of possibility framed as counsel. Fear is not weakness, they say, soft as silk yet sharp as obsidian. Attachment is strength, love is power. The galaxy bends to those who claim it, and each word resonates within Anakin, weaving with the threads of longing and isolation already tangled in his heart. He feels both relief and exhilaration, a sense of kinship with a mind that perceives the limitations of the Jedi and the immensity of what might be. Sidious tells no lies, not in the conventional sense, yet every truth is laced with omission, every comfort shadowed by consequence. Anakin does not yet perceive the full measure of the teacher's intent. He sees only clarity where the Jedi Council has offered constraint, opportunity where the Masters have presented caution. The shadow coils, patient and eternal, whispering that destiny may be claimed. If only the boy will listen. He seeks the Chancellor's counsel in secret, drawn by the subtle warmth of understanding, by the absence of judgment that has shadowed him in the temple. Palpatine's words are measured, deliberate, each phrase an instrument of persuasion, each pause a lesson in temptation. The boy, sensing a guidance beyond doctrine, begins to lean toward it, trusting instinct and desire where reason and order offer only restraint. In these encounters, the whisper grows, almost imperceptibly at first, a quiet pulse at the edge of thought. It promises mastery over fate, insight into the currents of the Force hidden from those who claim to serve it, and the preservation of those he loves from pain and loss. The vision of control, of dominion over life and death, thrills him, and the shadow coils tighter, silent and eternal, delighted in its patient work at night. In the solitude of chambers where the temple's light is muted and stars cast their pale reflection across crystalline floors, Anakin meditates on the Chancellor's words. They reverberate through his mind, entwining with dreams of Padma, memories of Tatooine, and visions of war and loss. He senses not manipulation, but understanding, a mind that sees what the Jedi cannot, that acknowledges his fears, his desires, his burdens, and in this acknowledgement the dark seed is nourished. The whispers are subtle instruments, like the touch of wind across still waters. They never command, they merely suggest. Yet suggestion is potent, for the boy feels the inadequacy of guidance he has received, the rigid walls of doctrine, the cold certainties of the council. He senses that destiny is vast, greater than any one order, and he is but its conduit. Palpatine's voice does not press him forward. It simply waits, mirrors his doubts, amplifies his yearning, and lets the shadow fill the spaces between thought and action. In visions, Sidious appears, not as a conqueror, but as a mentor, as an elder who has understood the currents of the galaxy and survived where others have failed. He whispers of knowledge unspoken, of power untaught, of mastery beyond morality, and the boy, sensing the emptiness within the restraint imposed by the Jedi, begins to crave this knowledge, to seek its counsel, to consider the possibility that obedience may be secondary to understanding. The shadow coils ever tighter, patient and eternal, a serpent entwined with longing and fear. It whispers of the shape of the future, of stars and systems bending under the hand of one who claims mastery, of life preserved through the discipline of power, of pain forestalled through decisive action. And somewhere within the boy, a spark ignites the recognition that prophecy is not merely to follow, but to seize. The suns rise over Coruscant, pale and distant. The boy steps into the light, outwardly composed, yet inwardly restless. He feels the whisper in every current, the unseen pulse beneath every choice. The Force hums, patient and eternal, and the shadow listens with satisfaction, for the boy has glimpsed the path, and he has begun, unknowing, the slow, sacred journey toward darkness, power, and the fulfillment of prophecy. And somewhere, in corridors of influence, in shadows that do not speak, the whisper continues, patient and eternal, drawing the boy ever closer to the edge where light meets shadow, where loyalty yields to desire, and where destiny waits, silent and inexorable, to claim him. Chapter 8. The Seeds of Betrayal. The galaxy is quiet, yet beneath the stillness, currents of change stir, subtle and inexorable. Anakin moves through the corridors of the Jedi Temple with a mind attuned to both duty and desire, yet weighed by whispers he cannot yet name. The shadow within him grows, patient and eternal, as the boy senses the widening gap between expectation and instinct, obedience and understanding. It is here, in these spaces between counsel and choice, that the seeds of betrayal quietly take root. Small acts first, almost imperceptible, questioning orders in thought, hesitating in obedience, bending rules to preserve what he alone perceives as just. Each choice, though minor in appearance, ripples through the currents of the Force. The shadow coils, observing the rhythm, patient as eternity. knowing that the smallest crack may one day become a chasm. It whispers, not with malice, but with inevitability, a voice that promises mastery over circumstance. If only the boy will lean into it, Padme's presence grows heavier in his thoughts, a tether that binds him beyond instruction, beyond restraint. He perceives danger in her newness to conflict, in the fragile peace she inhabits, and a desire to protect, to shield, to control, rises within him like a tide. The force hums, subtle, eternal, reflecting the intensity of attachment, bending around every pulse of fear, every flicker of longing. The shadow coils tighter, knowing that attachment is the key, the door through which betrayal may enter. The council senses unrest, yet they misinterpret its form. They see impatience, ambition, doubt, but they do not perceive the currents of fear and devotion, love and desire that intertwine within the boy. Their warnings are measured, their guidance precise, yet they cannot address what has not yet been named: the hunger for mastery over fate itself, the drive to seize control of outcomes that the order declares immutable. The shadow listens silently, patient, eternal. In dreams, he sees futures both luminous and terrible, faces of friends and mentors, of innocents and enemies alike, shift in endless cycles of cause and consequence. He perceives the fragility of life, the cruelty of inevitability, the inexorability of loss. And in these visions, a thought forms, subtle but insistent. Perhaps the Jedi do not see the whole truth of the galaxy. Perhaps their caution blinds them. Perhaps destiny requires decisions beyond obedience. The shadow coils, whispering uncertainty. The first tangible steps toward betrayal are taken quietly. He acts in moments of discretion, bending rules for outcomes he deems just, protecting those he loves with authority that circumvents instruction. Each act leaves no trace but a faint tension, a subtle disturbance in the currents of the Force, and with each choice, the boy senses both exhilaration and guilt, mastery and fear, as if the scales of fate themselves are trembling under his touch. Memory flickers in his mind, a distant candle against the darkness. The teachings of restraint, of humility, of patience echo faintly, yet they are overshadowed by the immediacy of responsibility, by the weight of lives in danger, by the unspoken truth that power is the instrument of protection. The shadow whispers, still, patient and eternal, urging him to embrace what is necessary, to claim what is rightfully within his grasp. Evenings in the temple grow heavy with reflection. Anakin senses the invisible eyes of the council, the silent judgment of masters, the weight of prophecy pressing upon his shoulders. And within, the shadow coils, patient, eternal, threading through each fear, each hope, each unspoken desire. It speaks not of cruelty, not of domination, but of certainty, of power necessary to preserve, to protect, to master the currents of fate. The boy listens, and in listening, the seeds of betrayal germinate. The galaxy beyond the temple stirs in chaos, wars flickering like distant stars, systems trembling under conflict. Anakin moves through these currents with skill unmatched, yet increasingly guided by his own moral compass, a compass that diverges subtly from the doctrines imposed by the Council. Each decision, each act of judgment, each bending of protocol, shapes him further, drawing him closer to the precipice where loyalty and desire, obedience and destiny will collide. The shadow does not rush. It waits, patient, eternal, as the boy walks the narrow path between fidelity and transgression. It whispers that betrayal is not a crime, but a recognition, a necessary act in the orchestration of destiny. And somewhere, in the quiet pulse of the Force, the seeds planted in these moments grow, slow but inexorable, roots twisting toward darkness, leaves reaching for power, as dawn brushes the temple spires with pale gold. Anakin stands at the threshold of choice, aware yet unknowing, eager yet fearful. The currents of the Force swirl about him, subtle and eternal, reflecting the tension of the galaxy and the turmoil within. And in the silent corners of perception, the shadow coils tighter, patient as eternity, awaiting the moment when the boy will step fully into his own power, and with that step, set the path toward betrayal, mastery, and the dark destiny that has been whispered to him since the moment of his awakening. Chapter 9. The turn beckons. The galaxy moves like a living organism, silent yet vast, each star a pulse in the unseen currents of destiny. Anakin feels the subtle vibrations of what is to come, the weight of choices yet unmade, and the inexorable pressure of prophecy pressing against the tender fabric of his soul. The shadow, patient and eternal, coils ever tighter, whispering that inevitability is only the first step, that the path has already begun, and that one surrender will alter the course of countless lives. Palpatine's presence grows more constant, less whispered and more tangible, though still shrouded in calm and certainty. The Chancellor's counsel is precise, attuned to the boy's fears and desires, acknowledging without judgment the turbulence within him. He speaks not of obedience, but of mastery, not of restraint, but of understanding. The words are subtle, almost indistinguishable from insight, yet within them lies the slow shaping of choice. Anakin listens, hungry and wary, exhilarated by the glimpse of a universe beyond the Council's chains. The visions of Podbem persist, haunting and tender, a tether to love and life alike. He dreams of loss, and in each dream the whisper of the dark side offers remedy, absolute and immediate. It promises the preservation of those he loves, the halting of suffering, the shaping of destiny with hands unbound by doctrine. Each vision is a test, subtle and unrelenting, showing that power can be both shield and weapon, salvation and doom. The shadow coils, patient, eternal, guiding him toward the inevitable. Moments of defiance grow more frequent. Anakin acts without waiting for instruction, bends rules without hesitation, intercedes where others would step aside. Each act is rationalized, justified in the logic of protection, in the necessity to prevent loss. Yet the masters perceive only the deviation, the impatience, the subtle erosion of loyalty. They cannot see the currents beneath his actions, the deep pulse of foresight and fear and love that drives him, nor the shadow that moves quietly alongside. Coiled and patient in dreams and meditations, Palpatine becomes a figure of authority and understanding, the mirror of desires unspoken, the voice that names the unnameable. He does not command, he guides. He does not push, he waits. And the boy, sensing wisdom and power beyond the Jedi, begins to yield, imperceptibly, to influence that promises mastery where restraint has faltered. The shadow listens and smiles, patient and eternal. The galaxy is at war, yet in its chaos Anakin perceives patterns, threads unseen by others, currents of consequence and opportunity. He begins to act not merely as a servant of the Order, but as an arbiter of outcomes, deciding who lives, who falls, who survives. Each decision shapes the galaxy and his soul alike, bending the future, subtly toward a reality not yet spoken aloud, a future waiting for one's surrender. One embrace of destiny, fear and anger whisper in the spaces between thought, subtle as the pull of twin moons on distant seas. He feels the vulnerability of those he loves, the fragility of peace, the inevitability of loss. And in each pulse of fear, the shadow coils, patient and eternal, guiding him toward the step he has long been invited to take. The force itself hums beneath him, resonant and eternal, reflecting both the peril and the power at the edge of his choice. The Jedi Council senses the widening gap, yet they misinterpret its meaning. They see ambition, doubt, frustration, but they cannot perceive the gravitational pull of destiny, nor the shadow that has coexisted with him since the moment of awakening. They cannot see the web of foresight and attachment and fear that guides each subtle act, nor the quiet inevitability of the turn that beckons. The moment arrives quietly, unannounced, in the still hours before dawn. Anakin stands at the threshold of the council chamber, hand hovering above the symbol of obedience, heart beating with fear, desire, and resolve. The whisper is clear now, patient and eternal. The power is within reach, the path laid bare, the consequences inevitable. To step forward is to claim mastery, to turn is to embrace destiny. The choice trembles before him, not as coercion, but as revelation. The shadow smiles, coiled and eternal, as the boy steps forward. The force hums beneath him, aware, patient, eternal. Stars burn quietly beyond the temple walls, distant witnesses to a turning that will echo through the galaxy. And in the silence, Anakin senses that the path he has chosen will demand everything: loyalty, love, morality, and ultimately, his very soul. The turn beckons, patient and irresistible, and he steps into its current, unknowing, unstoppable, and forever changed. Chapter 10: Fall of the Chosen. The galaxy waits in silent anticipation, though it does not know that it waits. Stars burn with indifference, worlds spin in quiet chaos, and the force hums beneath all things, patient and eternal. Within this vast web, Anakin stands at the edge of choice, the currents of destiny bending around him, the shadow coiled tightly within. It does not command, it only waits, whispering of power, of mastery, of what may be claimed if the boy will finally surrender. The council, steadfast and wary, seeks guidance from the boy they once called the Chosen One. Their words are measured, their warnings solemn, yet they cannot perceive the depth of the storm within him, nor the pull of the shadow that has accompanied him since the earliest stirrings of vision and fear. Each cautionary phrase only tightens the coil, each denied request, each denied insight, feeding the quiet, insistent fire that the dark side kindles dot in the hidden chambers of Palpatine's design. The boy is shown what is forbidden, glimpses of knowledge veiled from the Jedi's secrets of life, death, and the force that shimmer like distant suns on a blackened horizon. The whispers promise preservation of those he loves, of life itself. Each promise bears a shadow, subtle and infinite. The boy feels the weight of inevitability, the pull of prophecy, and the quiet thrill of potential power. He steps closer, inexorably, toward the threshold where light ends and shadow begins. Visions and reality intermingle, indistinct and potent. He sees the galaxy aflame, friends and enemies alike, falling to blades and blasters, the cries of innocence and betrayal mingling in the cosmic tide. His heart strains under the weight of attachment, His soul trembles with fear, and the shadow coils tighter, patient and eternal, guiding him toward the first act of irrevocable surrender. It does not speak in words, only in certainty, and he answers with instinct sharpened by love and dread alike. The boy's first strike is precise, deliberate, and absolute. He bends the currents of life and death in ways the Jedi cannot sanction, in ways that will echo through the corridors of eternity. The act is both betrayal and necessity, loyalty intertwined with transgression, love suffused with fear, and in that moment, the prophecy breathes through him, not as a promise of light, but as a summons to darkness. The shadow coils around his heart, eternal, unyielding, patient as the grave palm's presence is a tether he cannot sever, yet it becomes the instrument of the turn. Fear of loss, dread of suffering, desire to preserve all are sharpened to a blade by the whispers of the dark side. The boy, no longer merely knight, moves with clarity born of desperation and ambition. The currents of destiny flow around him, shaping him, bending him, until he becomes something both greater and more terrible than he has been before. The galaxy trembles as the first acts of the Chosen One's fall unfold. Jedi fall, systems burn, and the echoes of betrayal ripple outward like shock waves through the Force. The Council, vigilant yet blind to the depths of the currents, cannot halt what has begun. Their admonitions are futile. Their reason cannot pierce the tide of inevitability. The shadow listens silently, patient and eternal, knowing that every step taken, every choice embraced, is another root sunk into darkness, another chain forged. In the crucible of destiny, the boy's transformation is gradual, yet absolute. Love, fear, power, and despair intermingle until they are indistinguishable, a single, irresistible current. He bends the Force to acts that are unthinkable to those bound by morality and doctrine. Each act feeds the shadow, each success validates. The whispers, each compromise erodes the remnants of the light he once carried. And in these moments, the boy begins to take on the mantle of what he has been whispered to become: Darth Vader, instrument of prophecy, vessel of shadow, herald of a new order. The galaxy itself bears witness, though it does not know. Stars shimmer. In silent warning, winds shift across barren plains. Currents of life and death tremble beneath the weight of a single soul's choice. And the Force hums, patient and eternal, reflecting both loss and inevitability, despair and triumph, light extinguished and darkness claimed. The boy steps fully into shadow, the last threads of the Jedi's guidance severed, and the transformation into the Chosen One's dark avatar is complete. Yet even in the depths of surrender, a fragment of love endures, fragile and trembling. Padma, a presence both tether and torment, reminds the boy of what remains human, what cannot be fully extinguished. And the shadow, coiled and eternal, acknowledges this persistence, for even absolute power requires a seed of attachment to grow fully. The prophecy, fulfilled in darkness, yet contains the whisper of redemption, patient and eternal, awaiting the moment when balance may again be sought. The stars burn silently, indifferent witnesses to betrayal and transformation. The galaxy shudders beneath the footsteps of a newly risen Darth Vader. The shadow coils tighter, patient as eternity, as the boy now instrument, vessel, weapon moves forward, leaving behind the light of innocence, the guidance of masters, and the fragile certainties of what was once called hope. The Force hums beneath him, patient, eternal, and the prophecy speaks in silence. The fall is complete. The Chosen One is no more. And yet, even in the depths of darkness, the whisper lingers, faint and persistent, that one day the light may return, not by power, but by the bond that endures beyond shadow, beyond fear, beyond death itself. Chapter 11. The Blackened Armor. The galaxy trembles, though it does not know why. Shadows stretch across worlds, long and cold, whispering of a presence that bends life and fear alike. In the hushed corridors of the Force, currents shiver beneath a new weight, a weight clad in darkness, inexorable and absolute. Anakin, now fully transformed, moves within it, no longer boy nor knight, but instrument, weapon, and legend, the blackened echo of what once was, now wholly consumed by shadow. The armor is forged, a vessel of both life and death, a shell that binds flesh to machinery, breath to machinery, will to eternity. Each plate hums with the resonance of the Force, absorbing pain and memory, projecting terror in its silent, immovable presence. The boy who feared loss now becomes a fortress against it, encased in black, hollowed by shadow, yet vibrating with power, the embodiment of prophecy fulfilled through despair and mastery, breath rasping through mechanical lungs. He senses the galaxy's heartbeat, a rhythm altered by fear. The currents of life and death twist beneath him, bending toward his will. Systems quake in silent dread, unaware of the hand that commands both destruction and order. The shadow coils tighter, patient and eternal, whispering of dominion, control. Inevitability, it does not command, yet the armor itself speaks. The presence of Vader is the presence of destiny. Immutable and absolute in secret chambers, Vader remembers fragments of what he was. The boy on Tatooine dreams of Padmé, the teachings of the Masters, the hope of a galaxy saved. Each memory is a ghost, trapped behind the walls of black, yet they linger, soft and persistent, shaping choices, feeding the quiet ember that will one day flare toward light. Even in full darkness, the Force carries fragments of what is eternal. Patient, indestructible, the galaxy bends to the new Dark Lord's will. Jedi who survive the purges flee or hide, and fear becomes a palpable currency in every court and council. Systems bend, populations whisper, and planets tremble as if in anticipation of his passing. The Force hums beneath it all, patient and eternal, a river reshaped by the weight of one man's surrender. Every act of control, every calculated strike, every gesture of authority, cements the presence of the blackened armor as legend, myth, and terror all at once. Yet within the armor, life persists, fragile and unyielding. Breaths are counted, emotions measured, attachments hidden behind the mask of inevitability. Padmé remains a tether in memory, a faint pulse beneath shadow, a reminder of what once drove the boy to hope and fear alike. And the shadow, coiled eternal, whispers softly that even absolute power needs a seed of attachment to shape destiny fully. That fear of loss may be the guiding force even when the hand commands destruction. Vader moves across worlds, leaving behind whispers of prophecy fulfilled. He commands fleets, marshals legions, and strikes with precision that blends foresight and fear. The galaxy begins to understand the terror of the blackened armor, not merely as machine or man, but as the embodiment of inevitability itself, the shadow of destiny realized in flesh and steel. Yet even as he wields authority and fear, the Force hums with quiet rebellion, currents waiting for the faintest disruption, for a whisper of light amid the black. Within his meditation chambers, Surrounded by darkness, Vader feels the weight of his axe. Ghosts of friends, masters, and innocents drift through memory, faint as starlight, pressing against the blackened shell. Pain, remorse, and love swirl beneath mechanical lungs, a current unnoticed by the galaxy but alive in every pulse of the Dark Lord. The shadow listens, patient, eternal, guiding, shaping, yet leaving space for what may yet return, a seed of light hidden in the depths of night. Across the galaxy, stars burn quietly, indifferent witnesses to terror and order. Vader's passage leaves scars and structures alike, systems bending to inevitability, populations whispering in awe and dread. And the Force, eternal and patient, notes both the fall and the flicker that remains beneath blackened steel. The prophecy continues, unfolding, revealing that even in darkness, threads of light persist, patient and eternal, awaiting the moment when balance may again be sought. The blackened armor, a fortress of power and shadow, moves silently through the galaxy. Its presence is both absolute and incomplete, a vessel for terror and yet a tomb for the boy who once dreamed of freedom. The shadow coils, patient and eternal, whispering of dominion, inevitability, and the weight of prophecy. And somewhere deep within, the Force hums with the quiet certainty that one day the light may return to pierce the black, unmask the man, and awaken the soul beneath the armor's weight. The galaxy trembles, the Force hums, and Darth Vader walks forward, absolute, eternal, terrifying, and yet, beneath all shadow, faint and enduring, the whisper of what was and what may still be lingers. Chapter 12. The Reign of Shadows. The galaxy bows in silence, not from reverence, but from fear. Worlds whisper of a shadow that moves without sound, yet leaves a mark upon every life it touches. Darth Vader walks through the stars as a singular pulse of inevitability, his blackened armor absorbing both light and hope, bending the currents of the Force toward a path few dare to imagine. Each step reverberates, subtle yet eternal, like the heartbeat of destiny itself. The remnants of the Jedi scatter, ghosts of the Order hiding in shadowed corners of the galaxy. Some flee to distant systems, others seek refuge in the currents of the Force, yet all feel the weight of inevitability pressing from every direction. Vader's presence is absolute. It is not merely strength, but prophecy incarnate, a convergence of fear, power, and unyielding intent. The shadow coils around him, patient and eternal, whispering guidance as he extinguishes light wherever it resists. Ships burn in silent voids, planets bend to martial law, and whispers of rebellion echo faintly across star systems. Yet none can confront him openly. His strikes are precise, premeditated, and swift, each one a lesson in inevitability. The galaxy begins to understand that the blackened armor is more than machine or fleshed, it is a conduit for the shadow of prophecy, a force that bends both life and death to its will. Vader walks through corridors of captured temples, halls of memory and history now tainted by shadow. Ancient holocrons hum faintly, sensing the imbalance, whispering warnings that go unheard. He moves with measured intent, extinguishing any spark that might rise against the tide, hunting Jedi who survive the purges, and leaving fear as both message and instrument. Each act is methodical, each gesture suffused with the weight of inevitability, the hum of machinery harmonizing with the silent pulse of the Force beneath him. In quiet meditation, Vader recalls fragments of what he once was. The boy on Tatooine, the Jedi he respected, the love that bound him to life. These memories pulse faintly beneath the armor, shadows of warmth within the cold shell of command. They remind him, fleetingly, of what was lost, and of the choices that shaped him into this instrument of prophecy. Yet they are small, isolated, overshadowed by the certainty of the path he has chosen, the power he now commands, and the shadow that whispers eternal patience. The galaxy trembles beneath his authority. Planets submit, leaders bend, systems fracture or align. Fear is the language, obedience the currency, and the force hums beneath it all, noting both the magnitude of terror and the subtle flickers of resistance. The shadow coils tighter, patient, an eternal, guiding, shaping, sustaining, yet leaving room for threads of future light to weave quietly through the darkness. Vader's campaigns are surgical and relentless. Jedi are hunted with precision, populations subdued without hesitation, and those who rise in rebellion learn quickly that the shadow within him is both unyielding and inevitable. The galaxy grows quieter, subdued beneath the weight of a single presence. Yet, within this rain of shadows, currents of hope stir faintly, fragile yet persistent, whispering that darkness, however absolute, is never eternal. In the solitude of his chambers, Vader listens to the echoes of the past and glimpses of the future. Ghosts of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and the boy he once was drift faintly through memory, reminders of bonds broken, teachings abandoned, and love forsaken. The blackened armor contains him, sustains him, yet cannot erase what is eternal, the Force, patient and enduring, flowing beneath and through him, waiting for the faintest rupture, the quietest call of light. The reign of shadows stretches across the galaxy, a period of fear and order entwined. Yet even as systems bend and stars shine coldly above, the Force whispers, patient and eternal. That balance endures beyond tyranny. Vader moves as its instrument, a shadow of prophecy realized. Yet the seeds of redemption, faint and fragile, persist beyond sight. One day the currents will converge, the shadows will yield, and the echo of the chosen one will speak again. The galaxy trembles under the weight of his passage. Planets whisper, systems submit, and the Force hums beneath all things, patient, eternal, and aware. Darth Vader, blackened and eternal, walks forward, a shadow incarnate, leaving fear, obedience, and prophecy in his wake. And in the quiet spaces between stars, the faintest glimmer of hope stirs, patient, eternal, and awaiting the moment when light will pierce the black. Chapter 13. The Son of Prophesying, the quiet corners of the galaxy, where shadows have yet to fully claim the stars. A spark emerges, small and fragile, yet impossible to extinguish. Luke Skywalker is born, a child unremarkable in flesh, yet profound in potential, tethered to destiny by bonds unseen. The Force hums softly beneath his presence, patient and eternal, whispering of balance, of light, and of the currents that will one day converge upon the blackened shadow of Darth Vader. The boy grows amidst worlds distant from the weight of galactic tyranny. Tatooine, a desert of silence and heat, becomes both cradle and prison. Yet, within its humbleness, the currents of the Force thread gently around him. The whispers of destiny follow, subtle as wind over dunes, carrying the promise that one day the galaxy will reckon with both darkness and hope. With shadow and light intertwined, Vader moves through his reign with calculated precision. Yet the Force carries news of this new life. The blackened armor, instrument of fear, senses a presence, faint yet undeniable, vibrating in resonance with the one who was once the boy. the chosen one. The shadow coils tightly, eternal and patient, observing the emergence of the Son who carries hope, who may yet challenge the inevitable, who may bend the currents of destiny once more. Luke grows unaware of his heritage, yet the Force binds him quietly, subtly, threading lessons, instincts, and glimpses of truth through the fabric of his being. Dreams visit him, vague and fleeting, of stars beyond the deserts, of a figure both terrible and familiar, of a destiny larger than his comprehension. These whispers of the Force, patient and eternal, prepare him, shaping a path that will one day intersect with the shadow of his father. In hidden chambers of memory, Vader feels the ripples of this new life. It is not yet a threat, nor a promise fully realized, yet the currents are perceptible, like a subtle tremor before a storm. Within the blackened armor, beneath the machinery and shadow, a dormant chord stirs, the fragment of love, of attachment, of what remains human, senses the presence of the child and resonates faintly. A whisper of possibility and fear entwined. The galaxy itself hums in anticipation. Systems long subdued murmur in secret, sensing, though not understanding, the arrival of one who may shape the course of what has already begun. Rebels stir faintly, unaware of the boy's existence, yet moved by currents of hope carried imperceptibly. Through the Force, the shadow coils, patient and eternal, noting this emergence, whispering to Vader that inevitability is patient, yet not unchangeable, and that balance waits in the faintest of pulses. Luke's innocence, untainted by fear or ambition, radiates through the Force like starlight through mist. It is fragile yet enduring, a current that will one day confront the darkness, challenge authority, and awaken what has been buried beneath blackened armor. The whispers of destiny speak through him, patient and eternal, threading lessons of courage, compassion, and resilience, preparing him to fulfill a role that was set in motion long before birth, yet will only be realized through confrontation, struggle, and the enduring bonds of family in the quiet deserts. Luke learns of work, patience, and observation, unaware that the galaxy is shaped by the shadow of his father. The Force hums around him, guiding, nurturing, and waiting. Dreams of stars, of light and darkness, stir the mind, faintly preparing him for the day when he will step beyond the dunes, beyond ignorance, and into the currents that will demand choices both terrible and sacred. The shadow watches, eternal and patient as the boy grows. Vader's presence moves across the galaxy, absolute and unyielding, yet the Force hums, noting the emergence of one who may challenge inevitability. The prophecy lingers, stretched across generations, carrying both fear and hope. The son of prophecy is born into the quiet, carrying potential unmeasured, tethered to destiny, and bound inexorably to the shadow of the blackened armor. And in the silence between stars, in the currents of the Force, a whisper persists. The chosen one may fall, but through his blood the spark of light endures, patient, eternal, awaiting the moment when balance will be sought and the shadow confronted. Chapter 14. The call of the Force. The desert winds of Tatooine whisper through the sands, carrying currents unseen, voices unspoken, and a resonance that bends the Force quietly. Around one boy, Luke Skywalker, unknowing yet tethered to destiny, begins to sense patterns, subtle shifts in life and energy, faint echoes of a power that connects all things. The galaxy waits, patient and eternal, as the first tremors of awakening ripple through. The currents of the Force, The presence of the blackened shadow across the stars shapes the currents that surround him. Darth Vader moves as a storm, absolute and unyielding. Yet in the quiet corners of existence, the Force threads unseen guidance to Luke, small and gentle as sunlight through mist. Dreams visit him, flashes of stars, of voices, of figures cloaked in shadow and light, and he does not yet understand their meaning, yet the Force hums, patient and eternal, stirring the soul toward awareness. Obi-Wan Kenobi, in exile and silence, becomes a quiet beacon within the currents. He observes from afar, patient as the desert itself, aware of the stirrings of hope in the boy who carries the blood of prophecy. The old Jedi does not intervene openly. He waits, teaching subtly through observation, suggestion, and the rhythm of quiet guidance. Every word and act, small though it may seem, shapes the awakening of the Force within Luke. Threading preparation through innocence, visions grow in clarity yet remain veiled. Luke sees flashes of light and shadow, glimpses of a man encased in black, and a presence calling him to action and understanding. He senses fear and anger, loss and hope, interwoven in ways beyond comprehension. And in the quiet spaces of his mind, the Force whispers, patient and eternal, that destiny is both burden and gift, and that one day the currents will converge in confrontation and revelation. The boy begins to perceive the bonds that connect all things subtle at first: creatures, weather, machines, the life of the desert itself, and then, more distinctly, the threads of the galaxy itself. His hands move instinctively to assist, to balance, to correct. His mind senses disturbances before they manifest. The Force flows through him like a river beneath the sands, waiting for the current to widen, waiting for the moment when guidance must become choice. In dreams, Luke walks between stars. He hears whispers of a father he has never met, and senses both warning and promise. These dreams are not instruction, yet they shape his awareness, planting seeds of intuition, empathy, and courage. The Force hums beneath it all, patient, eternal, guiding, preparing him for the paths that will inevitably lead to the blackened armor and the shadow within. The galaxy itself seems to respond. Stars shimmer faintly, winds shift across distant worlds, and currents of life vibrate subtly, signaling that the presence of one destined to challenge the shadow has been felt. The rebellion has yet to rise, yet its heartbeat is faintly carried through the Force, resonating with Luke's emerging awareness. Even in isolation, the boy is connected, tethered by destiny to the currents of conflict and balance. Obi-Wan's presence is quiet but enduring. His guidance is subtle, delivered through suggestion, example, and the gentle shaping of circumstance. He does not instruct with force, for he knows the boy must awaken willingly. The Force cannot be imposed. Each encounter, each lesson, each quiet observation threads preparation into Luke's being, patient and eternal, until the boy is ready to confront the shadow that waits in silence across the galaxy. The blackened armor watchers, though unaware of the subtle awakenings in the deserts below. Vader's reign continues, absolute and terrifying. Yet the Force hums beneath it all, threading currents of hope and resistance. The boy grows in strength and perception, the seed of prophecy stirring toward recognition. The first call of destiny echoing faintly across the void. And in the silence of Tatooine's night, beneath twin moons and whispering winds, Luke feels it, a pull, a tug, a resonance beyond comprehension. The Force calls him, patient and eternal, toward understanding, courage, and confrontation. The currents are slow, the guidance subtle, yet the path is set, and the galaxy, shadowed and fearful, waits for the moment when the boy of prophecy will rise to meet destiny, and the blackened shadow will face the stirrings of light within a Sun. Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm. The galaxy shifts beneath the weight of silence and fear. Shadows stretch across star systems, and yet, in the spaces untouched by tyranny, currents of resistance awaken. Luke Skywalker, the son of prophecy, feels the pull of destiny more keenly with each passing day. The Force hums beneath him, patient, an eternal whispering of trials to come, of shadows to confront, and of the convergence of fate across generations. Tatooine, a cradle of quiet resilience, releases him slowly, imperceptibly, as if the desert itself acknowledges the boy's emergence. Obi-Wan Kenobi guides him gently, a presence both mentor and memory, shaping understanding without command, allowing the currents of the Force to awaken fully within him. Each lesson, subtle and measured, prepares Luke for the gathering storm, the invisible yet inexorable rise of conflict that shadows the galaxy, across the stars. Darth Vader's shadow continues to spread, a tide of fear, dominance, and inevitability. The blackened armor moves silently, crushing resistance, extinguishing sparks of rebellion, and consolidating power, and yet the Force hums faintly, carrying whispers of a rising hope, threads of light woven in secret, unnoticed by the darkened hand that claims dominion. The currents of destiny begin to converge, slow and inexorable, carrying with them both dread and promise. The rebellion begins to stir, fragile and cautious, yet persistent in spirit. Cells hidden across star systems communicate in whispers, gathering intelligence, supplies, and courage. They sense the weight of oppression, the absolute presence of shadow. Yet they also feel the faint stirrings of hope carried subtly through the Force. Luke's presence, though unknown to most, resonates through these currents, a silent beacon. Threaded into the fabric of destiny, Luke's departure from Tatooine is quiet, almost imperceptible. He leaves behind familiar sands, childhood routines, and the isolation of a life untouched by galactic war. Guided by Obi-Wan, he steps into a galaxy shaped by tyranny, yet threaded with hope. Every moment of observation, every lesson in courage, every whisper of intuition has prepared him for this passage. The desert fades, but the Force's call grows stronger, patient and eternal, leading him toward confrontation, understanding, and awakening in his meditations and quiet moments. Luke senses echoes of his father, glimpses of the blackened armor that casts shadow across the stars. He does not yet fully understand, yet a resonance stirs, subtle and persistent, linking father and son through blood, destiny, and the currents of the Force. The shadow waits unknowingly, while the light of prophecy moves steadily closer, preparing to challenge inevitability itself. The galaxy braces. Worlds long subdued murmur quietly, sensing the tides of rebellion and the stirring of courage. Fleets align, systems coordinate, and hearts pulse with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The Force threads these currents, patient and eternal, drawing the strands of destiny ever tighter toward the inevitable convergence. Luke moves forward, guided by instinct and wisdom, and the shadow of Vader waits, silent yet aware, for the echo of prophecy to stir in the hearts of those who will rise against it. Stars shimmer coldly, silent witnesses to the approaching storm. Systems tremble beneath the weight of oppression, yet currents of resistance wind subtly through the void. Luke steps further into his awakening, feeling the breadth of the Force, the pulse of destiny, and the weight of a lineage steeped in shadow. The blackened armor moves across the galaxy, absolute and terrifying, yet the currents of hope stir unseen, quiet and eternal. The storm gathers, not in noise or fury, but in inevitability. Currents of fear and courage, shadow and light, destiny and choice converge slowly across the galaxy. The sun of prophecy moves toward confrontation, toward awakening, toward the inevitable moment when the Force itself will demand recognition of balance. And in the silence between stars, the whisper persists. Darkness may dominate, yet light endures, patient, eternal, and awaiting the hour when it will rise. The gathering storm stretches across the galaxy, silent yet immense threading systems, hearts and souls, toward the day when Father and Son, shadow and light, will meet. And beneath the blackened armor, Darth Vader senses, faintly and unbidden, that the currents are shifting, that threads of hope persist, and that the prophecy, though long fulfilled in darkness, has yet to reach its final cadence. Chapter 16, Echoes of the Father the Force, trembles as unseen currents pull across the galaxy, subtle yet inexorable. Luke Skywalker, newly awakened, feels them stirring beneath his steps, faint echoes of power threading through the worlds he traverses. The presence of a shadow black, immense, and patient presses upon the edges of awareness, distant yet intimately bound to him. In the quiet of meditation, he senses not only the galaxy, but a tether reaching through blood and destiny, the shadow of his father, the instrument of prophecy, the bearer of blackened armor. Darth Vader moves across the stars, hunting, consolidating, commanding with absolute authority, and yet, beneath the weight of darkness, a current stirs, faint and unbidden. Memories of the boy he once was Anakin whisper through the machinery of his armor, resonances of love, loss, and fear. Each act of terror, each command given, vibrates against the pulse of what remains human, and the shadow notices, coiled yet uncertain, as the Force hums with the faint rhythm of possibility. Luke's journey carries him into the edges of that shadow. Fleets engage, worlds tremble, and whispers of resistance converge into action. The boy begins to sense patterns in conflict, strategies in chaos, and subtle threads connecting himself to the architect of fear. He perceives moments of hesitation in the blackened hand, a resonance of doubt hidden beneath authority and machinery, subtle as starlight filtered through dark clouds. These glimpses, though fleeting, ignite the first sparks of realization. The shadow he faces is not invincible, and its currents are intertwined with his own. Encounters across star systems, fleeting and indirect, leave impressions on both the hunter and the pursued. Vader senses an unfamiliar resonance, a pulse in the Force that draws closer with each step of the boy. It is faint, yet persistent, a vibration that evokes echoes of the past, attachment, hope, and the subtle stirrings of light hidden beneath years of darkness. The shadow coils, eternal yet restless, as the prophecy threads its strands quietly through the boy who carries both fear and promise. In meditation, Luke perceives fragments of memory not his own, a voice calling across deserts, the shimmer of blackened steel, the echo of choices made in anguish and love. These impressions are heavy, yet they guide him, shaping understanding, resilience, and purpose. The Force hums beneath him, patient and eternal, connecting the boy to the shadow across the stars. intertwining father and son in currents of destiny, both fragile and immutable. The galaxy itself resonates with anticipation. Systems aware of oppression, yet unaware of the stirring of hope, shift subtly, a tapestry of fear and courage, light and shadow, flowing toward convergence. The shadow, Darth Vader, moves with inevitability, yet senses an anomaly in the currents of presence of light, tethered to him by blood, bound to him by fate. The echoes of the Father speak silently, questioning, haunting, reminding that even in darkness, the Force preserves threads of balance. Luke's awareness grows, sharpened by instinct and guidance, the subtle whispers of Obi-Wan threading courage and insight through the boy's resolve. Each observation, each careful action, weaves him closer to the inevitable confrontation, preparing him for the moment when the currents of shadow and light will collide. The Force hums, carrying both dread and hope, drawing the son and father toward an encounter both foretold and shrouded in uncertainty. Within the blackened armor, Vader feels the stirrings faintly, though he cannot yet name them. A resonance of blood, of hope, of life, untouched by fear, courses quietly through the Force, brushing against the machine of power and terror. He senses the presence of the Son, not as threat yet, but as potential, and the shadow within him hesitates, coiled and eternal, feeling the faint tug of what was, what could be, and what may yet return. The echoes of the Father grow louder as destinies approach convergence. Across star systems, fleets and rebellions, whispers and deeds, the currents of the Force thread a path both inevitable and uncertain. Luke moves forward, carrying hope, intuition, and the quiet power of awakening. Vader, armored and commanding, senses the approach of the boy who carries the seed of light, and the shadow stirs with an unfamiliar weight. The possibility of confrontation, of choice, of awakening beyond fear, and in the stillness between stars, across the currents of the Force, a whisper persists. Darkness may claim the galaxy, shadows may dominate, but bonds of blood and destiny endure. The Son moves closer, the Father senses, and the prophecy, patient and eternal, begins to hum with anticipation of the hour when light will face shadow, and balance may be sought once more. Chapter 17. The Edge of Confrontation. The galaxy waits, in silent tension, as though the stars themselves hold their breath. Currents of the Force hum faintly, vibrating across systems, through worlds. And within the hearts of those who do not yet understand the convergence that approaches, Luke Skywalker moves along this hidden path, guided by instincts sharpened by the Force, by the gentle teachings of Obi-Wan, and by the unseen tug of destiny. The edge of confrontation draws near. Darth Vader, blackened and eternal, moves through the galaxy like a shadow made flesh. His presence is absolute, yet beneath the armor, beneath the machinery, the current stircoes of what was once Anakin whispered faintly, tethered to the boy who walks toward him. The shadow senses a change, subtle but undeniable. The Force carries a pulse, a resonance that cannot be ignored, and the blackened armor trembles imperceptibly in response. The first encounter is quiet, almost imperceptible. Luke perceives the currents before he sees the shadow, feeling the weight of destiny coiling around him like invisible chains. The galaxy itself seems to hold, systems trembling, stars flickering faintly, as though aware that a reckoning approaches. Luke's heart beats in rhythm with the Force, steady yet tinged with uncertainty, aware that the shadow before him is both father and instrument of prophecy, both foe and mirror, in the quiet, the currents of life and death intertwine. Luke senses Vader's hesitation, brief as a heartbeat, hidden beneath layers of anger, fear, and inevitability. He does not yet understand fully what he faces, yet the Force hums with patience, teaching him the rhythm of balance, the subtle interplay of shadow and light. Each step he takes threads a connection. Each motion draws him closer to the inevitable clash of destiny. Vader watches silently, sensing the boy's awakening, the tremors of hope, the echoes of innocence and power. Memories stir Padme, the boy he once was. The choices that led to darkness soul resonate faintly through the armor. He feels the pull of the Force around Luke, fragile yet insistent, and the shadow within him coils with unease, for the currents of destiny are not as absolute as they once seemed. The echo of the Father begins to resonate, faint and dissonant. Beneath the blackened exterior, the galaxy shivers as systems brace for the unseen confrontation. Fleets pause, populations whisper, and currents of the Force swirl subtly, weaving tension through the hearts and minds of those both near and distant. The edge of confrontation is not a moment of violence alone, but of recognition, a collision of blood, of choice, of prophecy, and of the shadow that looms eternal. Luke steps forward, guided by the Force, sensing the weight and the history in the blackened presence before him. He perceives the duality, terror and attachment, darkness and lingering humanity. The boy's understanding deepens. He feels the pull not only of conflict but of connection, that even in the shadow of terror, threads of the past endure, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for action, waiting for balance. Vader extends the shadow across the room, yet beneath the armor, beneath the machinery and the weight of command, the Force trembles. The currents shift, subtle and eternal, hinting at what may be lost, what may yet return, and what has always been bound together: Father, Son, light, shadow, destiny. Each pulse resonates with history, memory, and prophecy, shaping the moment. Even before it fully manifests, the edge is close. Luke feels it in his bones, in the hum of the Force, in the whisper of destiny threading through his heart. Vader senses it too, a dissonant chord beneath the armor, a hesitation, a flicker of possibility unaccounted for in the patterns of terror he has known. The blackened shadow and the sun of prophecy stand at the threshold, separated by history, fear and choice, yet bound inevitably by blood and Force. And in the quiet tension between them, the galaxy waits, patient and eternal. Stars burn faintly above, currents of life hum beneath, and the whisper persists. Confrontation approaches, yet even in darkness, the threads of light endure, weaving the path toward revelation, choice, and the fulfillment of prophecy that stretches beyond fear, beyond shadow, beyond death itself. Chapter 18: Redemption and Balance. The galaxy holds its breath. Stars shimmer faintly, as though witnessing a moment older than time itself. Currents of the Force hum in intricate patterns, threads of light and shadow entwined across space, across generations, and across the heart of one blackened soul. Darth Vader, the instrument of terror, the shadow of prophecy, stands at the precipice, facing the Son who carries both hope and the unbroken pulse of destiny. Luke Skywalker moves with purpose, yet not with hatred, for the Force has taught him patience and compassion. He senses the torment within the shadow, the echoes of a boy, a lover, a Jedi lost beneath machinery and fear. The currents swirl, a maelstrom of past choices and future possibility, as father and son, shadow and light, converge. The galaxy quivers in quiet anticipation, aware of a reckoning that transcends war, that threads through destiny itself. Vader's breath hums through machinery, a rhythm of life sustained by fear and shadow. And yet, beneath it, something long buried awakens. Memories of Padmé, of Anakin, of choices made in hope and love, now pressing against the blackened armor with silent insistence. The Force stirs, patient and eternal, whispering that even the most absolute shadow cannot extinguish all light, that even in darkness, a fragment of the soul persists. The confrontation is both violent and serene, for it is not only a battle of bodies, but of currents, of choice, and of destiny. Luke refuses to strike with anger, embodying instead the lessons of patience, courage, and understanding. The Force flows between them, pulsing, vibrating, carrying the weight of history, sorrow, and the faint glimmer of redemption. The shadow recoils subtly, sensing the unfamiliar power of mercy and compassion. A current, long forgotten yet enduring dot in the silence between strikes, between breaths, the echo of the father stirs. Vader feels the boy within him, the son he has never known, yet whose presence resonates through the Force. Memories press against steel, against shadow, against fear itself. The hum of machinery and the rhythm of life are pierced by a whisper. Choice remains, even here, even now, at the edge of darkness. The prophecy, patient and eternal, begins to fulfill its final cadence, with the weight of years, of terror, and of regret pressing upon him. Vader acts. The blackened armor moves, but no longer with intent to dominate or destroy. A decision is made, shaped by the currents of love and attachment that he once rejected, yet cannot erase. The shadow begins to unravel, and beneath it Anakin emerges, fragile yet resolute, guided by the pulse of the Force, by hope, and by the bonds that endure even through death. The Emperor's influence falters, confronted not by fleets or weapons, but by the enduring strength of connection, of choice, and of the Force itself. Vader, father, instrument, and soul intertwined, sacrifices what remains of shadow to save the sun, to restore balance, and to fulfill what prophecy could not without. Love and recognition. The currents of the Force surge, patient and eternal, weaving destruction and salvation into a single, luminous pattern. Luke senses the transformation, the release of shadow, and the rebirth of light within a man once lost. The galaxy shifts, imperceptibly, as though the universe itself acknowledges the convergence, balance restored, prophecy fulfilled, and the currents of shadow and light reconciled. The blackened armor is left behind, a shell emptied, while the soul of Anakin endures, bound eternally to the Force, to the sun, and to the promise that life and love persist beyond fear and domination. Across the stars, whispers carry of a moment that transcends time. The son and father reconciled, the shadow surrendered, the prophecy complete. Systems tremble with relief and awe, currents of hope threading through those who remain, and the Force hums with patient, eternal rhythm. Balance, once fragile and threatened, stretches across the galaxy, quiet, enduring, and sacred in the final moments, as stars watch silently and the galaxy exhales. Luke feels the pulse of the Force in its fullest, patient and eternal. He senses the presence of the Father within the currents, a whisper now of guidance and love, no longer shadowed by terror. The prophecy concludes not with domination, but with mercy, not with destruction, but with reconciliation, not with fear, but with the enduring cadence of balance restored, and in the silence after the storm, the galaxy remains. The Force hums beneath all things, patient, eternal, and aware. The shadow has been pierced by light, the blackened armor laid aside, and the chosen one rests within the currents, an echo of both sorrow and redemption, forever part of the living. Breathing galaxy, the prophecy endures, not as fear or domination, but as a lesson whispered across time. Even in darkness, light persists. Even in terror, love remains. And even in the shadow of inevitability, choice, mercy, and balance endure, patient and eternal.